Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and I'm going to be honest. I thought about scripting this or trying to come up with some fancy way with all kinds of edits and voiceovers of how to do this video, but because it's so personal and near and dear to my heart, I just thought it would be best for me to just sit down, turn the camera on, and just share my thoughts on this matter. As I'm sure you can tell from the title that you clicked on, I'm just going to be sharing you my initial thoughts on why a Metal Gear Solid movie is a bad idea. Now, I believe maybe a week or two ago, the director, who happens to be the director of the newly released King Kong film that just came out, said that he was going to helm the upcoming Metal Gear Solid movie. As I'm sure some of you guys can understand, I was shocked that they were still going through with this. I thought they had canned this years ago, and I figured that any logical studio would not even attempt to do this because of the potential catastrophe that this would end up being. Now, as I'm sure you can tell just from the small images, I am a huge Metal Gear Solid fan. I have an entire wall of Metal Gear Solid. I have an entire shelf exclusive away from all my other video games of just Metal Gear Solid. I have Metal Gear Solid figures, and I'm even thinking about getting a Metal Gear Solid tattoo one day. I'm not going to say what it is, but very, very, very soon. So you can understand my initial fear of why this is just a bad idea. Now, I could make an hour-long video, but I just want to get the important facts out of the way. As a Metal Gear Solid fan, as being a fan since 1997 or 8 when the first game on PlayStation 1 came out, which, mind you, is a classic, and I would say probably alongside Final Fantasy 7 was probably one of the two games that made me a story-based driven gamer. You could not tell the story in 2 hours. You could not tell the story in 2.5 hours. You simply cannot tell a Metal Gear Solid movie, or you cannot properly tell the story in a way that would fit a film. That is the number one problem. Any real fan will tell you that. Because as the history of video game movies has proven, in order to adapt something from the video games to the movie, you're going to have to make significant changes. And many of those changes can be justified, but many of them you just cannot. Just recently, I saw Assassin's Creed, which, mind you, happens to be the longest video game movie to date at a running time of 2 hours and 20 minutes. And 20 of those minutes were actually significant, while the other 2 hours were focused on everything as an Assassin's Creed fan we did not care about, which dealt with anything involving the Animus. I have yet to meet a single legitimate fan of Assassin's Creed say that they like the Animus. They like the concept of the Animus. I personally feel that when it comes to Animus, just throw us in and let us kill people for the next 8, maybe 10, 12 hours. That is all I cared about seeing. If they had just reversed the time links and spent like 2 hours in the past and maybe 20 minutes in the Animus just explaining what we're about to do next, I think the movie would have been a lot better. But the problem with Metal Gear is that it is so complex. There are so many elements. There are so many philosophical ideas that the game runs over. There are so many very in-depth characters that you could not balance any of them. And there's even rumors that it's going to be rated PG-13, which, I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. But Metal Gear Solid has never been rated teen. Maybe the Metal Gear Acid games, maybe, but not any of the core games. And what's worse is that they've decided to do Metal Gear Solid, which is not even the beginning of the storyline. If they were going to make a Metal Gear Solid movie, it should focus on the real first Metal Gear in the storyline, which I personally don't want them to see to do, because this Metal Gear Solid 3 is not just my favorite installment in the franchise. This is my favorite video game of all time. This is mine. I don't want any studio touching it, and I don't give a damn what Konami says. This game is mine, and no one is going to take that away from me. So, now that I got that out of the way, another issue that I have with this concept is that the fact that it's so far in the storyline, if they want to do a movie adaptation about this, there is so much backstory that I consider a lot more interesting than anything that happens in this game. Half of this movie is going to be spent trying to explain things that aren't shown to the viewer. And so when you have characters like Gray Fox and Liquid Snake, I mean, you have to explain who Big Boss is. This isn't some character you can just flush over and say, oh, who's this Big Boss character? You have to explain his history and why it's significant to what is going on in the Metal Gear Solid 1, because it is very significant. I mean, people are going to wonder, what the hell is a Metal Gear? And if we can be honest, as the games have progressed on over time, I would honestly say that the Metal Gear weapons have become some of the most insignificant plot devices in the game. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Metal Gear Rex is it's a pretty badass looking machine, but it's really hardly in the game. It doesn't really show up until the final third, and even when it does, it has like maybe one significant moment, but after that, it's kind of just brushed aside, and the game continues. Now, if they wanted to do a Netflix series about this, that's something I could get behind, because you could actually do it in episodes, and if anything, you could spend even more time explaining elements that maybe the game didn't quite flesh out too well. Another issue that I have with this game is just how could a studio sell this? Because this is, I would never consider this to be an action game. It's based off of espionage. It says right there on the front, tactical espionage action. This isn't a run and gun, go around killing everything in sight type of game. You certainly could play it that way, but that's not what Metal Gear is all about. It's always been about stealth. It's always been about the characters, and I just don't think that any movie could really project that properly. And when it comes to video game based movies, you have the consistent challenge of, who do we make this movie for? Because there's going to be a battle. You either make a movie for the fans, meaning that if you don't know anything about this franchise, you're not going to get it, which has been the case for several games that have come out recently. Most recently, I would say Warcraft fell into this trap, because I was never really a fan of the series itself, and I had a hard time really understanding it. But I know that a couple of my friends that I did happen to see this with, who were fans, could understand it very, very clearly, and they had to explain it to me. So I guess this movie would work for them. Or you make a movie like the Resident Evil franchise has been, in which they make a movie strictly for movie fans, and pretty much say, screw anyone who is a fan of the video game series, even the old school games. And the trick is trying to find a balance that helps everybody. Now, some people have said, oh, one day we might have a video game based movie that does what comic books have done. The problem is that up until maybe recently, comic books have never been this cinematic. Metal Gear Solid, in my opinion, was really a milestone of its time at being really the most cinematic game we had ever had during the 90s. In fact, I would say it's more cinematic than games we have now. And the Metal Gear Solid franchise itself has been able to get away with things that no other franchise can do. I mean, let's talk about Metal Gear Solid 4 for a second. You do realize that its final cutscene is an hour and a half long. It is literally a movie of itself. No other franchise, no matter what studio is doing it, could ever get away with that. But Metal Gear could get away with it because it was the first to do it. And that is why it is allowed to do that. And another element that really kind of has me worried is that the director said that he wanted to make something that stayed true to what the original creator Hideo Kojima wanted to do. They wanted to do something in his vision. Apparently, this director has been living under a rock for the past 2 to 3 years and doesn't understand that Hideo Kojima and Konami aren't really the best of friends right now. In fact, it's kind of crazy right now, because we're still kept in the dark of exactly what happened between the two groups. But with Konami having the rights to Metal Gear, they are not going to want anything that resembles anything that Hideo Kojima did. So basically, what you're saying is, we are going to get a Metal Gear Solid movie that has nothing to do with what Hideo Kojima's vision originally was. We're going to get something that is so vastly different. We're not going to get the Metal Gear Solid that Hideo Kojima made. We are going to get the Metal Gear Solid movie that Konami would have made, which is going to be completely alien to any of us fans that have been with this franchise for the longest time. It's just, why do we need to make video games turn into movies? They were made video games for a reason. I mean, it's like why? What is the point? Oh, we want to bring people in. We want to bring, people who aren't fans of the franchise. We want to convince them to play the games. I've never heard in my life anyone that goes to see the movies and then automatically wants to play the games. I've never heard of that. Because to me, if people are so lazy that they would rather see a movie version of this game storyline, rather than sit their ass down and spend however many hours it requires in order to really understand the story, then they don't deserve to know the story. I'm the one that sat down with my controller late at night playing these games, and I got a full experience. both with the gameplay and the story. I was willing to push through those several hours, not just sit my ass down and eat my popcorn and just have molds and loads of exposition and action scenes thrown at my face. There are certainly some movies that can do that, but not Metal Gear. Metal Gear Solid is very, very special to me, and there's just so many elements that they could not transfer well into a film where I don't have control, because now I don't have any personal influence of what is going on the screen. I'm just sitting there and just letting it tell its own story rather than having any kind of influence. And I just don't like having that amount of control taken away from me. This almost kind of hurts me on a personal level because this franchise means so much. I mean, I know that there are some fans that have been, kind of optimistic and say, well, give it a chance. You never know what might happen. But if history has shown us anything, it is that we have really yet to have a movie do it properly. Now, there are definitely a few exceptions. Like, I say Mortal Kombat was probably one of the better video game movies, or something like Prince of Persia, which it's a little bit off, but it kind of still gets the concept. But this is probably one of the single most important and greatest video game franchise we have ever had in the history of gaming. And I just don't think that it's going to be able to transfer well. And the question is, how do you sell this? What kind of audience are you expecting to bring in? Because really, Metal Gear Solid is really not as well known. And I think it's the fact that the series is officially over, except for this new Metal Gear Survive bullshit that Konami's spending to spit out, which is just disgusting to look at. So it would make no sense to try to bring in fans who aren't fans already in now. It just makes no sense. Or maybe this is just some way to make a cheap buck, which makes no sense, because I highly doubt that Konami is going to make any money from this bullshit game that they're coming up with. And I just don't want to see it tainted. If there's any the Hollywood could mess with any other franchise in history, and I would be able to look the other way and say, you know what, you can mess with Uncharted. You can make a shitty Uncharted movie. I got the games, that's cool. You can make a shitty Dead Space movie, and you're fine. I can look the other way. You can make a shitty live-action Final Fantasy movie, which they technically have 2 CGI movies, which I think are okay, and I can look the other way. But when it comes to Metal Gear, that is the one franchise I will not look the other way for. Make a Netflix series. That I will support, but not a 2-hour movie, because you're not going to get a 3-hour movie. And I highly doubt you're going to get 2.5 hours. And it's just the fact that most people who go to see this, who aren't even fans of this franchise, are not going to get it. And they're going to think it's shit, when it's not shit. This is a masterpiece of a franchise. It always has been for me. And I can understand that people who aren't fans of this franchise can't see that. I understand that. But I see that, and so do millions of us. And all we want to see done with this is for it to be respected and left alone. Konami has already done enough damage as it is, and we don't need Hollywood's influence to cause more damage. We don't need to make the wound even bigger than it already is. We're already trying to heal from this. And I don't think that this Metal Gear Solid movie is going to help. This isn't going to bring people together. It's just going to tear us apart. And this is the time when we need to be together. And that's really all I have to say on the matter. I'm speaking from the heart. And I know this might not be very, very detailed, but that's just how I feel about this. I just don't think this is a good idea. But I really would like to know, do you guys agree with me that this is a bad idea, that they just cannot do a proper Metal Gear Solid movie with 2 hours, or 2.5 hours, or even 3 hours? Do you think they should do a Netflix series? Or do you think that they should do it properly if they really want to try, and just start at the very beginning of the timeline, because there's so much backstory before Metal Gear Solid 1 that explains so much? Share your thoughts with me and everyone else in the comments down below. And if you like this video, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to check out my future videos. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.